Weeks passed, and Emily's quiet campaign of punishment continued. The once proud and confident Martin was now a shadow of his former self, wandering aimlessly through the grand halls of his penthouse, desperate for even a glimpse of forgiveness he feared would never come. His repeated attempts to redeem himself fell short, leaving him trapped in a relentless cycle of guilt and sorrow, a cycle Emily orchestrated with painful precision. One morning, something shifted in Martin. He realized that his words, no matter how heartfelt, had lost all weight. Apologies, no matter how earnest, meant nothing to Emily. She needed to see actions, real, meaningful change, and he resolved to show her he was capable of it. It wasn't just about regaining her trust, it was about becoming a man worthy of it. That morning, Martin woke with renewed determination. Forgiveness wouldn't come from pleading or persuasion, it had to be earned. The first step, he decided, was to respect Emily's need for space. She had to see that he was willing to let go of control, to step back without forcing her hand. But he also needed to show her, in small yet meaningful ways, that he still cared. Martin began observing the subtle details of Emily's daily life, her routines, her preferences, the little things that brought her comfort. She loved peonies, their delicate beauty seemingly at odds with her steely resolve. Her morning coffee was always the same, strong, with no sugar. These details, once insignificant to him, now felt like lifelines in his effort to reconnect. That afternoon, Martin visited a boutique florist and purchased the finest bouquet of peonies he could find. He knew better than to hand them to Emily directly; she would only reject them. Instead, he left the flowers on the kitchen table without a note, quiet, unassuming, yet undeniably deliberate. When Emily returned from her walk, Martin observed from a distance as she paused in front of the bouquet. Her expression remained unreadable, but she reached out, picked up a flower, and brought it to her nose. She didn't comment, didn't smile, but she didn't throw them away either. To Martin, it was a glimmer of hope, a small step forward. In the days that followed, Martin continued his efforts. He set the breakfast table carefully, making sure her coffee was brewed just the way she liked it. He left small tokens of thoughtfulness, of books she'd mentioned, a neatly folded blanket on her favorite chair, all without expecting acknowledgement. He avoided imposing himself, ensuring his presence was felt without being intrusive. Emily remained guarded, the wall between them unyielding. Yet, there were moments, small cracks in her armor, that gave Martin hope. She didn't outright reject his gestures, and the hostility in her gaze seemed to soften, if only slightly. He knew it was a long road, but he was willing to take it one careful step at a time. One particularly cold evening, Martin found Emily on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, gazing out at the glittering lights of Buffalo. He hesitated before joining her, a steaming cup of tea in his hands. "Here," he said quietly, placing the cup beside her. "I thought you might want something warm." Emily didn't look at him but accepted the tea, her focus remaining on the skyline. Martin stood beside her, silent, not wanting to disrupt the moment. For the first time in weeks, the tension between them felt less suffocating. After a long pause, Emily broke the silence. "Why are you doing this?" Martin, her voice was steady, but beneath it, there was a trace of curiosity. Martin took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Because I've realized that words mean nothing anymore," he admitted. "What I did, it can't be undone with apologies. But I want to show you that I'm changing. Not just for you, but because I need to be better for myself too." Emily remained quiet, her expression thoughtful as the cold wind brushed past them. "You can't change the past," she finally said, her tone softer than he expected. "I know," Martin replied, "but I can change the future." For the first time that night, Emily turned to face him. Her eyes, though still guarded, held a flicker of something different, curiosity, perhaps even consideration. She wasn't ready to forgive him, and Martin knew that. But the fact that she was listening, that she hadn't walked away, felt monumental. Over the next few days, the dynamic between them began to shift. Emily still kept her distance, but her actions felt less cold. She accepted the flowers, drank the tea he brought her, and even engaged in brief, light conversations over breakfast. It wasn't much, but it was progress, and Martin clung to it. The turning point came one evening as Martin prepared to leave for a business meeting. He was adjusting his tie when Emily entered the room. Her expression was unreadable, but her words caught him off guard. "Can you cancel your meeting?" she asked simply. Martin froze, surprised by the request. Emily had shown no interest in his schedule or activities for months. Without hesitation, he nodded, pulling out his phone to cancel the appointment. Whatever she needed, he wasn't going to miss the opportunity. They spent the evening sitting on the couch, a small but significant distance between them. The silence, once oppressive, now felt almost comfortable. After a while, Emily broke it. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said plainly, "but I can see you're trying. Maybe that's a start." Martin's heart swelled. He knew the journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but Emily's words gave him hope. For the first time, he believed there was a chance not just for forgiveness, but for something new, something real. And he was willing to fight for it, one step at a time. The night unfolded quietly, with Martin Collins and Emily Smith exchanging words about mundane, inconsequential matters. For Martin, it was a triumph, albeit a small one. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he glimpsed the possibility of rebuilding something with Emily. Her walls, which once seemed impenetrable, appeared to be cracking ever so slightly. He vowed to tread carefully, determined not to underestimate her resolve again. But even as their conversation seemed to signal progress, a shadow lingered between them. Martin knew Emily hadn't laid all her cards on the table. There was still a secret she held close, a piece of the puzzle that he hadn't yet uncovered. The thought unsettled him, but for now her willingness to engage, even briefly, was enough to keep his hope alive. In the following weeks, Martin experienced an uneasy blend of optimism and apprehension. Emily no longer met him with outright disdain, but she hadn't fully opened herself to him either. It was as if an invisible barrier remained, leaving him in a perpetual state of waiting. He knew he was being tested, that every word and action was scrutinized, and for the first time in his life he found himself unsure of how to proceed. One stormy evening, the sound of rain tapping against the glass windows of the Buffalo penthouse mirrored Martin's restless thoughts. He noticed Emily sitting in the living room, her posture distant, her gaze fixed on nothing in particular. There was a heaviness about her, a weight that seemed to press down on the room. Martin hesitated, unsure whether to interrupt, but his curiosity, his need for answers overcame his reluctance. Breaking the silence, he spoke in a voice that betrayed his nervousness. "Emily," he began, his words deliberate, almost hesitant. "I know there's something you haven't told me, something you're keeping from me. I can feel it." His eyes searched hers for a response. "Please, if there's something still unsaid, I need to know." Emily remained motionless at first, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She avoided his gaze, her silence stretching into what felt like an eternity. Martin fought the urge to press further, understanding that patience was his only ally now. Finally, she exhaled deeply and lifted her eyes to meet his. There was a depth of sorrow in her expression, but also a flicker of determination. "You're right, Martin," she said, her voice steady, but tinged with emotion. "I've been holding something back, something I never thought I'd have the strength to tell you. But maybe it's time." Martin felt the air grow heavier, his heart pounding in anticipation of what she was about to reveal. Whatever it was, he knew instinctively that it would change everything. Leaning forward slightly, he waited, bracing himself for the truth. Emily's voice, though firm, quivered with pain. "Do you remember the company you ruined, the one my father poured his heart into?" she asked, her words slicing through the air. "I told you how you destroyed our family, but that wasn't all you took from me." Confusion clouded Martin's face as he whispered, "What do you mean?" Emily looked away briefly, her hands trembling as she fought to steady herself. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer, almost a whisper. "I was pregnant, Martin." The weight of her words struck Martin like a blow to the chest. His breath caught as he struggled to process what he'd just heard. What he managed, his voice cracking under the strain. Emily continued, her gaze fixed on the floor as tears welled in her eyes. When he died, when we lost everything, she paused, her voice faltering. The stress, the heartbreak, it was too much. I lost the baby. Martin's legs felt as though they would give out beneath him. A suffocating guilt enveloped him, greater than anything he'd ever known. He had spent weeks grappling with the impact of his actions, but this was a devastation he couldn't have imagined. He had taken not only livelihoods but a life that never had a chance to begin. Emily, he choked, his voice barely audible. I didn't know. I swear I never could have. Her sharp gaze stopped him mid-sentence, tears now streaming down her cheeks. No, you didn't know, she said bitterly. Because you didn't care to know. You tore lives apart, Martin, without a second thought. While you thrived, I lost my child, my baby, and you went on as if nothing had happened. Her words were daggers, each one carving deeper into the fragile remains of Martin's composure. He longed to say something, anything that could make amends, but he knew no words could undo the pain she had endured. I don't have the words, he finally admitted, his voice hollow. What I did, it's unforgivable. I'll never forgive myself. But please, Emily, if there's any way I can make this right, anything at all, tell me, and I'll do it. Emily studied him for a long moment, the silence between them filled with unspoken anguish. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a quiet strength. I don't know if I can forgive you, Martin, she said, her honesty piercing. What you did, what happened. It broke me. But she paused, her tone softening slightly. I can see you're trying. Maybe, one day, I can find a way to move forward. But it won't be easy, and it won't be quick. Martin nodded, his heart a tangled mess of hope and despair. I'll do whatever it takes, he vowed, his voice resolute. I'll prove to you that I've changed, that I can be someone you trust, someone you can maybe, someday, forgive. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was a glimmer of something new in Emily's eyes, a cautious opening, a possibility. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. And for Martin, that was enough to keep going. We'll see, Emily Smith said with a quiet sigh, her tone laced with both caution and a glimmer of possibility. We'll see if you can. The silence that lingered after her words was weighty, not just with tension, but with unspoken potential. Emily stood, her movements deliberate, and walked toward the door. Martin Collins remained on the couch, watching her leave. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel the same crushing despair. Instead, a faint light of hope flickered within him. He understood now this was going to be a long road, but at least there was a road to take. In the days that followed Emily's candid revelation, Martin found himself changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. Her words echoed endlessly in his mind, a relentless reminder of the pain he had caused, not just to her but to so many others. Yet, instead of allowing guilt to paralyze him, Martin chose to let it propel him forward. He didn't just want to mend his relationship with Emily. He wanted to become the kind of man who was worthy of respect, not only hers, but that of the people he had wronged in his ruthless rise to success. That morning, Martin made a decision. The past would not define him forever. He resolved to confront his mistakes and take responsibility for the lives he had disrupted. The first step in his journey was to seek out the families whose livelihoods he had destroyed. He started with an old competitor, a man whose small business had been obliterated by one of Martin's heartless corporate takeovers. Martin arrived unannounced at a modest house on the outskirts of Buffalo, a stark contrast to the opulence of his own penthouse. He knocked on the door, his heartbeat loud in his ears. When the door opened, a weary-looking man appeared. The lines on his face told a story of struggle and loss that Martin could no longer ignore. I'm Martin Collins, he began, his voice carrying a sincerity he hadn't felt in years. I've come to apologize. The man stood in stunned silence, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. Then, with a bitter laugh, he replied, Apologize? And what's that supposed to fix now? Martin met his gaze, his tone steady but humble. I can't undo the damage I've caused, he admitted. but I want to help rebuild what I tore down. I'm here to offer compensation and support to try and make amends as much as I can." Over the following weeks, Martin immersed himself in the arduous process of redemption. He visited more families, knocked on countless doors, and listened to stories of pain and perseverance. He didn't just offer money, though. He gave generously to help struggling businesses recover. He also invested his time and energy, sitting with these people, hearing their grievances, and working to understand the ripple effects of his past actions. Slowly, he began funding recovery programs and supporting small entrepreneurs, hoping to repair the harm he had done. Emily watched his efforts from a distance, her skepticism unyielding at first. She observed his every move, waiting for signs that his transformation was merely superficial. Forgiveness, she reminded herself, wouldn't come easily. But as days turned into weeks, Martin's actions began to speak louder than words. She saw a man who was no longer defined by arrogance or greed, but by determination to be better. Against her will, she started to feel something unexpected, an inkling of respect, even admiration. One crisp evening, as the city lights glimmered faintly through the mist, Emily stood on the balcony, lost in thought. She barely noticed Martin approaching until he spoke softly. "How was it today?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Martin exhaled deeply, the weight of his day reflected in his tone. It was hard, he admitted, but it needed to be. Each conversation, each apology, it's helping me understand who I was and who I want to become. I'm doing this for you, Emily, but also for myself. For the first time, Emily turned to face him, her expression softening. There was something different in his demeanor and authenticity that hadn't been there before. The Martin Collins who had once been brash and overconfident was gone. In his place stood a man earnestly striving to right his wrongs. "I can see that, Martin," she said, her voice measured but kind. "And I think I'm ready to try. Maybe it's time to let go of the past and think about building something new." Martin felt a wave of relief so profound it nearly overwhelmed him. Her words were a lifeline, a chance to start over, not as adversaries bound by a contract, but as two people willing to forge a genuine connection. As the 6-month marriage agreement approached its conclusion, something unexpected began to unfold. Emily Smith and Martin Collins, once bound by a cold, transactional arrangement, found themselves drawing closer in ways neither could have anticipated. Their conversations, once stilted and guarded, became warm and natural. Moments of shared laughter emerged, breaking the tension that had once defined their interactions. Slowly, against all odds, love began to take root, a quiet, unassuming love that neither had expected but both could feel. They were no longer two strangers navigating a forced union. Instead, they became two individuals rediscovering one another, with genuine curiosity and affection. One evening, as the agreement neared its end, Martin decided to prepare a special dinner. He understood the significance of this moment. So much had changed between them, and he couldn't bear the thought of their story ending here. As they sat across the candlelit table, Martin's voice, tinged with a rare vulnerability, broke the stillness. "Emily," he began, the nervousness in his tone betraying the confidence he was known for. "I know our agreement is almost over, but I don't want this to end. I don't want us to end. I've fallen in love with you, Emily, truly, and I want us to continue this time as a real couple. No bets, no games." Emily's gaze softened, her heart touched by the unguarded sincerity in his words. She hadn't expected this, but as she listened, she realized she had been feeling the same way. Over the past few weeks, her own emotions had quietly shifted. "I love you too, Martin," she replied, her voice steady yet tender. "And I want to try. I want to build something with you, but this time as equals, as a real couple." That evening marked a turning point for both of them, a moment of unfiltered happiness after months of doubt and struggle. They had overcome barriers that once seemed insurmountable, and now they were ready to move forward together. A few months later, Emily began to notice subtle changes in her body. After a routine checkup, the news was confirmed she was pregnant. When she shared the news with Martin, his reaction was one of overwhelming joy. He pulled her into his arms, tears of laughter and gratitude mixing as he held her close. "I want to do this right," Martin said, his voice steady with resolve. "I want to marry you again this time, for all the right reasons, not because of a bet or an agreement, but because I love you, because I want to spend my life with you." Emily smiled, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. "I want that too, Martin," she said. "This time it'll be a real wedding, a fresh start." Their second wedding was a quiet, intimate affair, shared with only their closest friends and family. There was no pretense, no excess, just a celebration of love and the journey they had taken together. It was a day filled with meaning, a testament to their resilience and the depth of their commitment to one another. Martin, reflecting on the road they had traveled, knew that his journey was far from over. He still had work to do, not only to continue earning Emily's trust, but to prove to himself and others that he had truly changed. He was determined to be the man Emily deserved and the father their child would need. As the music swirled softly around them during their first dance, Emily rested her head against Martin's chest, her voice barely above a whisper. Who would have thought it all started with a bet? Martin chuckled softly, holding her closer. Who would have thought it'd be the best bet I ever made? With hearts full of hope and a future brimming with promise, Emily and Martin stood ready for the next chapter of their lives, a chapter defined not by mistakes or regrets, but by love, redemption, and the joy of a new beginning. Together they faced the world stronger and more united than ever before. The small home they had chosen to build together was nestled on the outskirts of Buffalo, surrounded by tall, swaying trees and the quiet hum of nature. It was a far cry from Martin's once lavish lifestyle in the city, but it suited them perfectly. The years had transformed their lives in ways they never could have imagined, creating a love story that inspired everyone who crossed their path. Their love was not loud or boastful, it was a quiet, steady force, like the gentle rhythm of waves on a shoreline. Every moment they shared, every challenge they overcame, seemed to deepen their connection. Martin was in the garden, his hands coated in dirt, as he tended to a bed of peonies aflower that had become symbolic of their relationship. Emily stepped onto the porch, their toddler, Sophie, on her hip. The little girl's laughter rang out as Emily leaned against the doorframe, watching her husband. Martin, Emily called softly, a smile tugging at her lips. "You're spoiling those flowers more than you spoil us." Martin turned, wiping his hands on his jeans and grinning. "Can a man spoil his wife in his garden? It's all for you anyway." Sophie wriggled in Emily's arms, her chubby hands reaching toward her father. "Daddy?" Martin hurried over, scooping the little girl up and spinning her around. "There's my sunshine," he said, planting a kiss on her forehead. Emily watched them, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had never imagined this life, a life filled with love, laughter, and peace. The scars of their past had faded, replaced by the beauty of what they had built together. Their love story became the kind that people spoke about in quiet admiration. Friends and neighbors often sought advice from Emily and Martin, drawn to the authenticity of their relationship. One evening, they hosted a small gathering for their close friends. As the group sat around a warm fire in their backyard, the conversation turned to love and second chances. Joe, Martin's oldest friend and the one who had once set the bet in motion, raised his glass with a sheepish grin. "You know," he began, "if someone had told me years ago that you two would end up like this, I wouldn't have believed it." Emily chuckled, her hand resting lightly on Martin's. "Neither would we," she admitted. "How did you do it?" one of their neighbors asked, her tone filled with genuine curiosity. "How did you move past everything and build this?" Martin glanced at Emily, his expression thoughtful. "It wasn't easy," he said honestly. "We had to learn to listen, to forgive, and to be patient. Love isn't always about grand gestures, it's in the small, everyday moments. It's in choosing each other over and over again." Emily added, her voice steady, "It's also about letting go of pride and being vulnerable. We both made mistakes, but we decided to grow from them instead of letting them define us." Their words resonated deeply with those around them, planting seeds of hope and understanding in their friends' hearts. As the years went by, their love continued to evolve. Martin supported Emily's dream of opening a small floral shop in Buffalo, and Emily encouraged Martin to mentor young entrepreneurs, helping them navigate the business world with integrity, a lesson he had learned the hard way. One late afternoon, Martin walked into Emily's shop, carrying a thermos of her favorite tea. The smell of fresh flowers filled the air, and Emily looked up from arranging a bouquet, her face lighting up at the sight of him. "You didn't have to do that," she said, taking the tea gratefully. "I wanted to," Martin replied, leaning against the counter. "Besides, I needed an excuse to see the prettiest florist in town." Emily laughed, shaking her head. "You're shameless." "Only for you," he said softly, his eyes warm with affection. Moments like these reminded them of how far they had come, of the love they had nurtured through every trial and triumph. One day, Sophie, now a teenager, asked her parents a question that caught them off guard. "How did you know you were meant for each other?" she asked as they sat together in the living room. Emily and Martin exchanged a glance, their expressions filled with a mix of surprise and tenderness. "We didn't know at first," Emily admitted. "But sometimes love isn't about knowing, it's about discovering. Your dad and I had to fight for what we have, but that fight made us stronger." Martin added, "It wasn't fate that brought us together, Sophie. It was choice. We chose to believe in each other even when it was hard." Sophie nodded, her curiosity satisfied but her admiration for her parents growing. As Martin and Emily grew older, their love continued to inspire those around them. Their story was one of redemption, resilience, and the beauty of choosing love despite imperfections. At their 25th wedding anniversary celebration, surrounded by friends, family, and loved ones, Martin raised a toast. His voice was steady but filled with emotion. "To my wife," he said, looking at Emily with tears in his eyes, "you've taught me what it means to truly love and be loved. Every day with you is a gift, and I'm grateful for the life we've built together." Emily, her own eyes glistening, responded, "And to my husband, who showed me that second chances can lead to something extraordinary. You are my heart, Martin, and I wouldn't trade our story for anything." Their love story, once born out of a flawed beginning, had become a testament to the power of growth, forgiveness, and commitment. Martin and Emily's journey reminded everyone who knew them that love, when nurtured with patience and kindness, could withstand the test of time and inspire generations to come. If this story of love, redemption, and second chances touched your heart, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and share it with your friends and loved ones. Martin and Emily's journey teaches us that true love is not about perfection, it's about persistence, forgiveness, and the courage to grow together. What started as a rocky relationship born from a careless bet transformed into a powerful testament to the resilience of love. Overcoming betrayal, guilt, and heartbreak, Martin and Emily chose to fight for a bond that became stronger with every challenge. Through their story, we see the beauty of vulnerability, the power of redemption, and the joy that can come from choosing each other every single day. This isn't just a story about two people, it's about the choices we make to nurture love and the determination it takes to rebuild trust. Martin's journey from a man consumed by pride to a devoted husband and father is a reminder that it's never too late to change. Emily's strength and grace show us that forgiveness is not weakness, but a gift we can give to ourselves and others. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful story. How did it inspire you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a love story that overcame obstacles like this? Share your feelings and reflections in the comments below. Your perspective is what makes this community so special, and we value every voice. Let's keep spreading stories of hope, resilience, and love. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more inspiring narratives that touch the heart and remind us of the power of the human spirit. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story.